With the beautiful summer weather here, I figured now would be a great time to teach you guys how you can prime your kits with a rattle can so you can go ahead and get started with customizing and painting your kits. Let's get it. But before we can get to priming, let's talk about the kit for today. I'm going to be using Chuchu's Demi Trainer as I'm already planning to hand paint this kit, and I figured it'd be a great kit to use to show you guys how you can prime it without an airbrush. And on top of the kit, we're going to need our primer as well. I'll be talking about the primer a little bit later as we get ready to actually paint, but in order to prepare our pieces, we're going to need a few things. First, you're going to need something to hold your pieces as you spray them. So for me, I like to use meat skewers and poster tack or blue tack, but if you're planning on upgrading to an airbrush, I highly recommend picking up some gator clips so you can go ahead and securely clamp down on your pieces and hold them as you start to spray them. Now, if you don't have any of these clips available but you want to go ahead and get started, you can always leave your kit fully assembled and stand it up on a surface to paint it, but just know that you won't be able to get the bottom of the feet unless you come back later and do that separately. Personally, I'd recommend separating the kit out as much as you can to make sure that no parts are covering other parts, but if you just want to break it down by subsections such as arms, legs, waist, torso, and head, you're more than welcome to do that so long as you're happy with the coverage that you get. With our kit ready to go, let's head outside to begin our priming process of the Chuchu Demi Trainer. Alright, so we're out here in my driveway and I'm going to show you my setup real quickly here. I have my paint still on the paint station here. I have it set up on a table only so that it's easier for me to grab as I spray paint it. And the paint that we're going to be using today is going to be the Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500. Now, I have this because it's what I use in my airbrush. I like it a lot and it's what's available at my store. If you have Tamiya or something else that you use for your Rattle Can primers, works perfectly fine. Setup's going to be basically the same. The reason we're outside is because we want some place that's going to give us good ventilation so that we're not breathing in our paint fumes. So we want to make sure we take into account humidity. If you're living in an area that's really high humidity, you might need to wait till it kind of comes down a little bit. Personally, where I live, it's roughly about 60 to 70% most of the time. Today might be a little bit lower because we have like a really clear day, which is why I'm out here. So if you're aiming to spray outside, I'd say lower humidity is better. If it's very humid where you live, you can't do too much about that. Just try to pick a day that you think might be really good or really low as it can be, and go ahead and get outside and spray. So I'm going to set the camera down and we're going to go ahead and get spraying our paints. Real quickly before we get started, this is a brand new can when it comes to spray painting your paints. A lot of you guys are going to get new cans as you guys go along. So if you've been spray painting and maybe you want to start with a new can, or if you have an old can, this can still apply to you. But basically we're going to talk about how we shake our cans up. So initially when you get it, you're going to feel the ball bearing that's inside the can is going to catch on the paint. And really what we want to do is we want to shake it to a point where that ball bearing feels like there's no resistance in the can. That's generally the rule of thumb that I like to follow. Some people like to go by minutes, and a lot of the times that usually is a good recommendation. Some cans will have time recommendations on them. I haven't found one on these specifically. If I can read it later, I'll see if I can find it here on the can somewhere. My Japanese is a little rusty, but we're going to go ahead and shake it at least to the point where it doesn't sound like it is meeting resistance. So if you can listen to it real quickly. I don't know if you can hear, but you hear the ball having, and you can even feel it too, the ball is having a little trouble traveling through the can. So as we shake it, we're going to feel that resistance get lighter because we're going to have our paint is now going to be mixing in with the propellant that's in the can, making it easier to spray. So I'm going to go ahead and start shaking it, and we'll come back in a little bit to hear the difference between how it sounds now and how it sounds afterwards. Ooh, quick pause. Okay. That was my other tripod. So if you can listen, I don't know if you can tell the difference, but it sounds a little bit different. The ball is having an easier time move through the can. That's because as we've shaken it up again, the paint has mixed in with the propellant, making it easier for the ball to move around. So some people also recommending, if it's a little bit colder, but it's still a good day to paint, putting these in some warm water to help I guess loosen up the paint a little bit. It's warm, not hot water, because you don't want to damage the can, make a bomb out of this. But basically warm water, keep it in there, warm it up a little bit, loosen up the paint, make it easier to mix, make it better for when we're spraying. So I'm gonna keep going a little bit longer, make sure it's nice and mixed up. You can always keep going if you want to go. You can always keep going. You can never really over mix these things, so just keep going if you feel like you want to keep going. But I think I'd say roughly about 4 minutes or so, that's more than enough. Now that the can's ready to go, let's talk about paint control. Unlike an airbrush where we can adjust the amount of paint that's coming out, Rattle Can is basically an all or nothing principle. So how do we control the paint as we're painting? Well, We control how much paint goes on the piece by the distance from the piece that we hold it, and also how quickly we pass across the piece as we're spraying. For example, if I were to take this leg section right here, I'm gonna get a lot more paint on it if I'm this close to it versus if I'm way back here, getting about that much space distance, right? Also, if I'm spraying in quick little passes like this, I'm gonna get less paint on it as if I were to hold it and just go really slowly across. So finding a balance is gonna take some time. There is no real clear answers to how to do it because everyone's going to be a little bit different. Some people may be a little bit closer but go faster. Some people prefer a little bit further away and go a little bit slower. It really comes down to what works for you and what gives you an even coverage. A couple things to keep in mind: you want to start your spray before your piece and stop your spray after the piece. That way you can make sure that you're not stopping halfway or 3/4 of the way and then the paint stops the rest of the piece. And you also want to make sure that, again, as you're spraying and you're moving it, you're not going closer and then further away again, because then what will happen is you'll get a light pattern, really fixed spot, and then a light pattern again. So best thing to do is try to hold it at a distance that you can keep it constant and spray and then move and keep it very consistent as much as you can. You want to turn the piece here. If you need to angle it differently, try to keep it, again, as consistent as possible. It'll come with time how consistent you can get it, but basically, again, you want to make sure that you're controlling for the distance and the speed at which you're spraying the piece. Last thing before you paint, make sure you check the wind direction is going to be. You don't want the paint coming back in your face. So got a quick squirt bottle of water. Basically, I'm checking, making sure that the spray paint, wherever which way is going to go, it's going to go away from me, not in my face. So as I spray it out, I can see that the wind is kind of going around this way. So I know not to stand and spray it into the wind, getting all the paint back in my face. So now that we have all that down, let's go ahead and get ready for paint sessions. I have a mask like this. I'm going to use it to protect my lungs. If you don't have it, I'd recommend getting I recommend getting that if you can. You want to protect your lungs. If you don't have that or you don't have money for that, use anything that you can to protect your lungs. A scarf, a bandana, if you still have some COVID masks, anything is better than nothing. But as always, I'm going to be using this for my own safety so I don't breathe in the paint. And also, just in case the wind changes on you and you happen to catch a face full of paint, you're not breathing that straight in. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and back it up and start spraying a piece, and I'll show you what I'm looking for as I start spraying. Also, as you're spraying, you're going to need to continuously shake this, so keep checking on it. You can, again, never can really over mix the paint. So as you're spraying, take a couple seconds to give it a quick shake, spray a couple pieces, give it a couple seconds to shake, spray a couple pieces, and keep shaking. So if you see me shaking as I'm painting, it's just to make sure that the paint is still mixed. So as you can see with this piece, I was doing more of an up and down motion. That's because, again, majority of the piece is on an up and down plane. So I can do spray and up and down, turn it, spray up and down. It's the same thing as if going side to side. It's just in a different direction. So as you get more comfortable spray painting with your rattle cans, you can do different styles like that. If you have weird angles, you could play around. Again, as long as you're moving in the direction of most of the piece, you'll have an easier time. Now, as opposed to going down versus up, really doesn't matter, because I know sometimes as you're spraying down, your way that the particles will float up towards the piece, but again, because the propellant is pushing it outward, most of the times it'll go underneath and then up behind the piece. So play around with the different styles as far as the spray patterns. I'm going to move the camera in a little bit closer so you can kind of see more close up how it looks as I'm spraying. I wanted to give you guys a further back to kind of see more of the distance that I'm playing with and what I'm comfortable with, and then now you can see up close what it looks like as I'm spraying. So a couple things before we wrap up today. As you can see, I prefer to go a little bit smaller bursts when it comes to my spray pattern. That's generally because for me, it's about making sure I don't put too much paint on the first pass, because for me, it's always easier to add more paint than it is to add too much and have to strip it down and start over again. So for me, I prefer to do small, tiny little passes, frequent checks to make sure I got everything, and then just keep going until I feel comfortable that I've got every part of the piece. If you go too quickly and you add too much, you can always strip down the paint using alcohol. And if you haven't checked that video out, I'll go ahead and leave that link up in the corner. But let's go ahead and wrap up today's video. So there you guys have it, a quick video on how you can prime your kits with a Rattle Can. Just like anything else in this hobby, it's gonna take a little time to find that sweet spot as far as getting smooth coverage without being too wet, and also making sure that it's not too light, that you're going to be able to see through the primer and have the original color of your kit affect your paint. Feel free to practice on any of the runner tabs or the spoons that you have lying around, and if you happen to paint a kit and you're not happy with it, you can always strip it and start back down using isopropyl alcohol. With that said, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you found some value in this video, and remember, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.